And they were very excited that I agreed to do this, because if you appear on stage with someone talking about these things, it gives the impression that the ideas are worth debating, or that the person is worth debating. In this case, neither is true. I'm going to continue to disparage Stephen for a little bit.
This was a debate between an atheist scientist, Lawrence Krauss, and a Christian who's a scientist, Stephen Meyer. As you can see, it started with a bang. I'll keep most of my comments toward the back end, but I want you to see the evidence that Meyer presents, and then we'll get right to that back and forth between Krauss and Meyer and how the Christian responds. I think it collapses the atheist case like a house of cards. But let's jump into the setup first right now.
Now, there are lots of things that do give this appearance of design in biology. The discernible architecture of an animal body plan, the intricate organs such as eyes and hearts and things that we find in the world of mammals, the intricate circuitry, genetic circuitry that we are now discovering that controls animal body plan development. And yes, these amazing miniature machines that are being found in cells, including the now famed bacterial flagellar motor with its many protein parts, rotor, stator, bushings, drive shaft, etc. But from a biological standpoint, whether you accept Dawkins's explanation or not of apparent design, all biologists recognize there's something that lies biologically underneath all these appearances of design. And it is the information necessary to build these exquisite structures. And we now know about where a lot of that information is stored. A lot of it is in DNA. We're finding that it's also stored in other places in living organisms. Now, just looking at that intricate motor from a minute ago, and then look forward to, this is one of the parts of that motor. The motor is made of proteins. The proteins are made of subunits called amino acids. And to get the parts of the motor to fold into the right structure, three-dimensional structure, the amino acids of each protein have to be sequenced properly, and that's where DNA comes in. DNA provides the instructions for arranging the amino acids that cause the proteins to fold into three-dimensional shape, that allow proteins to do all the amazing jobs they do in cells. They catalyze reactions, they process information, they build the structural parts of intricate machines. Now, our appreciation of what DNA does, of course, started with the discovery of its structure in 1953 with Francis Crick and James Watson. And even more, and this was the famed double helix structure that we all learn in biology. But I think even more significantly was the recognition by Francis Crick in 1957 of the digital character of the information that's stored in the DNA molecule. This is his famed sequence hypothesis. Crick argued that the four characters, or the four chemical subunits that run along the interior of the molecule, called nucleotides or nucleotide bases, function just like alphabetic characters in a written text, or we might now compare them to digital characters in a section of machine code or software. The information stored in DNA is a striking appearance of design. Dawkins himself calls the machine code of the genes uncannily computer-like and compares it to what you might find in a computer engineering journal. He goes on to say in a more recent interview that genetics has become a branch of information technology. It's pure information, it's digital information, it's precisely the kind of information that can be translated digit for digit, byte for byte. He goes on to say that Darwin would have been fascinated by the discovery of the information at the foundation of life, and maybe he would have been. But it also turns out that evolutionary theory has been unable to explain the origin of this information. This is because it's been the information at the foundation of life has turned out to be a difficult thing to explain for two different branches of evolutionary theory. Chemical evolutionary theory, which attempts to explain the origin of the first life and the information required to build it from simpler non-living chemicals. And biological evolutionary theory, the origin of new forms, which attempts to explain the origin of new forms of life from simpler pre-existing forms of life. In both cases, by reference to the principle I just outlined, you need new information to build new biological form, whether we're talking at the one cell level or at the multicellular level of a new body plan. In Murray Eden's words, that no currently existing formal language can tolerate random changes in the symbol sequences which express its sentences. Meaning is almost invariably destroyed. Now, there's a reason for that. If you got a combination lock with 4 dials on it, and each dial has 10 digits, how many different possibilities are there? Because we're all tempted to say 40, 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. But of course, that's the wrong answer. It's actually 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. That's 10 to the 4th. So that's 10,000 possibilities. And that's why the lock works. There's a lot more ways to go wrong than right. So if you want to search for the correct combination that's going to open the lock, perform a function if you're a thief, you are overwhelmingly more likely to fail than to succeed. A random search is more likely to fail than to succeed. Let's say there's a thief outside the auditorium. He sees a bike. He wants to figure out how he wants to crack the code, crack the combination. If he's especially diligent, he turns 1 dial every 10 seconds. In a little over 14 hours, he can get to 5,001 combinations, which means at that point it would be more likely that he would succeed than he would fail. In which case, the hypothesis of a successful random search might be more likely to be true than false. But what if our thief faced a lock like this? With 10 dials, not 4 dials. Now how many possibilities are there that need to be searched? Well, now the number increases dramatically, exponentially. It's 10 to the 10th, or 10 billion possibilities. I did the same math. Turns out that in 100 years, if he does nothing but search those dials, he's going to search no more than 3% of that entire, all those possibilities in his entire life. So now ask yourself a question. Is it more likely that the thief will succeed or fail in a random search of the total number of possibilities? Obviously, it's more likely that he'll fail. He can't sample enough of the total space to have a reasonable chance of succeeding. It's going to be overwhelmingly more likely that he'll fail than he'll succeed. In which case, the hypothesis that he would succeed is going to be more likely to be false than true. Now, this all applies to life because DNA and proteins are also combinatorial systems. They can be likened to bike locks. There's lots of possible ways of arranging those ACs and G's and T's along the spine of that DNA molecule.
Okay, right now we're going to hear how the atheist scientist reacts to this, and that is going to be great. But there seems to be this digital information in DNA, and it doesn't seem like there's been enough time to produce anything beneficial out of that. Meyer says it needs specified complexity. If you and I were playing a card game, any arrangement of cards I dealt you would be ridiculously unlikely. But it's not just that it's unlikely, it's like having the specified complexity of having exactly the hand that you need to win the whole game and having it over and over and over and over again. That's what Stevens says is going on with DNA. It's not just that it's incredibly unlikely, it's that it's the specified complexity that makes it work. That's what indicates intelligent design. Now let's jump in and hear how Krauss responds.
Evolution is not a random process. I mean, and Richard talks about it and at length, and so should we all. Evolution is a directed process. It's directed by natural selection. It's the argument you gave is the same as the argument that the old argument, well, it's, you know, creating a living being by evolution is like a hurricane going through a junkyard and producing a 747. That sounds pretty convincing if you talk about all the possibilities for all the parts of the junkyard, but that's not how it works. It's directed. Digital algorithms, which you tried to talk about, is the machine that just won a go. Okay, it used evolutionary learning algorithms. It could have, I mean, if you looked at all the algorithms it could do by random, in the history of the universe, it would never be able to win a go. It wasn't directed or the algorithms weren't even written by the computer scientists. The machine itself learned by trying different things and seeing what worked and didn't work, and threw out those directions that didn't work. In a short time, in fact, the lifetime of deep thought, that machine, which has only been around for a few years, it was able to beat the best Go player in the world by evolutionary algorithms.
There's a big difference between a purely chance hypothesis and a hypothesis that combines chance and natural selection. And the critique that I'm providing is one which is critiquing natural selection acting on random mutational variations. So I'm not arguing from chance alone. The point is that so I am perfectly aware that the mechanism that I'm critiquing is not straight chance, but it's a search for possibilities, and then natural selection would select those that are functionally advantageous. And so I don't have a simplistic understanding. And in fact, in my work on origin of life, I look at chance hypotheses, those that combine chance and necessity, including the RNA world hypothesis, and also those models that involve self-organization, and that really is comprehensive as far as the different models that have been proposed. The algorithms that Professor Krauss mentioned are very interesting simulations, but they invariably involve information being input by the programmer. Dawkins has this famous algorithm where he says he has the program simulate a Shakespeare phrase, methinks it's like a weasel. But it doesn't simulate the way things actually work in biology, where in biology, in the algorithm, he's positing a process. Anyway, the programmer inputs information in the algorithm.
So in the end, if a programmer has to give the kind of information that Meyer is talking about, that's intelligent design. The programmer is the intelligent designer. Far from showing that there is no intelligent designer, this seems to support the intelligent design case that to get information like this in the time we're talking about, you need an intelligent designer. Now, there's far more to say about this, and it's not just intelligent design that gives evidence that there's a God. There's also evidence from the beginning of the universe. So if all you heard is this clip, you're not going to get the whole story. So click the video that's on the screen right now and listen to Stephen Meyer on Joe Rogan talking about that.